Good morning, everyone. This is today's reading lesson. What's going to happen is I'm going to read the next two chapters from Wild Robot, and then once I'm finished, I will explain to you what you're going to be doing for the questions today. When my explanations are finished, I will then ask you to pause the video. You will answer the questions on the sheet that's attached, and then once you've finished answering the questions, I will go through the answers. Chapter 4. The robot hatches. As you might know, robots don't really feel emotions, not the way animals do. And yet, as she sat in her crumpled crate, Roz felt something like curiosity. She was curious about the warm ball of light shining down from above. So her computer brain went to work and she identified the light. It was the sun. The robot felt her body absorbing the sun's energy. With each passing moment, she felt more and more awake. When her battery was good and full, Roz looked around and realised that she was packed inside a crate. She tried to move her arms, but they were restrained by cords. So she applied more force. The motors in her arms hummed, a little louder, then the cords snapped. She lifted her hands and pulled apart the crate. Like a hatchling breaking from a shell, Roz climbed out into the world. Chapter 5. The Robot Gravesite. Those otters were now hiding behind a rock, their round heads nervously poked up, and they watched as a sparkling monster emerged from the crate. The monster slowly turned her head and she scanned the coastline. Her head turned and turned, all the way around. And it didn't stop turning until she was looking right at the otters. "Hello, my otters. My name is Roz." The robot's voice was simply too much for the skittish creatures. The biggest otter squeaked and the whole gang suddenly took off. They galloped back across the robot gravesite, flopped into the ocean, and raced through the waves as fast as they could. Roz watched the otters go, but her eyes lingered on the sparkling objects that littered the shore. The objects looked strangely familiar. The robot swung her left leg forward, then her right, and just like that, she was taking her very first steps. She stomped away from her crate and over the rocks, and through the gravesite until she was standing above a broken robot body. She leaned in and noticed the word Rosm lightly etched on the torso. She noticed the same word on all the torsos, including her own. Roz continued exploring the gravesite until a playful little ocean wave washed over the rocks. She automatically stepped away from it. Then a bigger wave sloshed toward her, and she stepped away again. And then a gigantic wave crashed over the rocks and engulfed the entire gravesite. Heavy water pounded against her body and knocked her to the ground, and her damaged sensors flared for the first time. A moment later, the wave was gone, and Roz lay there, dripping and dented and surrounded by dead robots. Roz could feel her survival instincts, the part of her computer brain that made her want to avoid danger and take care of herself so she could continue functioning properly. Her instincts were urging her to move away from the ocean. She carefully got to her feet and saw, high above the shore, the land was bursting with trees and grasses and flowers. It looked lush and safe up there. It looked like a much better place for our robot. She had just one problem. To get up there, she would have to climb the sea cliffs. So, for today's questions, you're going to be looking at vocabulary. Now, you've done this work already, so it shouldn't be anything new, but I'm just going to remind you how we answer vocabulary questions. So when you encounter a word, and vocabulary means words, essentially, the words that are in the text. So if you encounter one and you want to know what it means, or if somebody like me asks you what a word means, and you're not quite sure what it does mean, you've got two options. The first option is to look at the root words. And here's an example in blue, pine cone. So if you want to know what a pine cone is, you might already know what a pine cone is. But if you don't, you can use the root words to help you. So it's made up of two parts. You've got pine and cone. Pine and cone. Well, in my brain, I know that a pine is a type of tree, and I know that a cone like an ice cream cone, is this kind of shape. So I'm thinking now, a pine cone is something off a tree that looks like that, and I know that I've seen those little brown things that fall off trees. So that's what a pine cone is. So if you're not sure on a word, you could try looking at the word, seeing what parts it's made up of, and if you can make sense of it. Another option is to use the context of the sentences. So here's a couple of sentences from this morning. Mr. Blake was late for work. His car careered into the car park. Careered into the car park. Now, careered is a new word for me. I'm not sure what that means. So I'm going to look at it. The root word, you could have careered, career, like a job, that doesn't really fit with a car entering a car park. So I'm going to try and use the sentence context to figure it out. So we know Mr. Blake was late and his car came into the car park, but it careered in. So there's lots of options there. Careered could mean his car entered the car park. His car drove slowly into the car park. But because I was late for work, it's going to make sense that careered means moved swiftly, and probably, because I'm so late, a little bit out of control. So there's two options. You've now got a sheet attached to your email, and what I would like you to do is to use these techniques to try and see if you can figure out what the words mean. The words on your sheet in red, you will all find those words in the text of the last two chapters of Wild Robot. So pause the video now and answer the questions. Pause. Okay, so hopefully you've had a good go at answering these questions. So I'm just going to run through the answers with a few little explanations. So question one, find the word hatchling. What do you think hatchling means? Well, hatch, I can use the root word here. Hatch is when something comes out of a shell. So a hatchling is a bird or an animal that comes out of a shell. For example, you've got little baby chickens, snakes come out of eggs, turtles come out of eggs. All those kind of things are hatchlings. So in the context of Wild Robot, Roz hatched. She didn't come out of a shell. Her shell was her crate. So in a sense, she's still a hatchling. Question number two. The monster slowly turned her head as she scanned the coastline. What is a coastline? Well, here's a good one to use the root words. You know what the coast is. That's the bit between the land and the sea. And a line is you know what a line looks like. So a coastline is that bit of land, that line between the sea and the land, like a beach or a shore. Next part of that question was how many synonyms can you think of for scanned? So she scanned the coastline. Scanned, looked, examined, inspected, peered, stared, all those different synonyms for the word scanned. Number three, what do you think, choose a word that means the same as skittish. Well, the otters, they ran into the ocean, they weren't sure about Roz, so skittish, that creatures were skittish. That would be nervous, not confident, not huge, not cute. Even though there might be all of those things, the one that makes sense in the sentence is nervous. What does the word galloped tell you about how the otters moved? That's question 4. You all know that horses gallop, and a horse moves quite quickly, so the otters moved quickly. Find the word lingered. What do you think it means? This is the one where you have to use the context. So they lingered, and it means that they stayed there for quite a long time. They hung around. Question number 5, the word torso. Torso is a part of a body. It's not your arms, it's not your legs, it's your trunk, the middle bit that everything's attached to. Your head's attached to your torso, your arms are, your legs are. Question number 7, a word that means the same as engulfed. So the wave engulfed the gravesite. So what did it do to the gravesite? Did it destroy it? It might have done. Did it clean it? Possibly, because it's made of water. Or did it cover the gravesite? The answer there is covered. But they're all quite plausible. Okay, so now I would like you to send me an email with your scores if possible. Thank you.